People really need to start understanding the real change here. So the key, though, is going to be prompting, and that's the questions, and really understanding what questions to ask and how to get somewhere with your your line of questioning, depending on the content and the goal in mind. So I think, for one, it's going to start at that level. At the earliest levels, we'll have math, we'll have reading, and then we're going to have to really start talking about inquiry. How are you asking questions, and how do you go deeper into that level of inquiry from the earliest of stages?
Welcome to the podcast, listeners. Innovation isn't just about what happens in classrooms, it's about how leaders use technology to think, plan, and lead smarter. As both acting superintendent and assistant superintendent, Dr. Jason Hasty is proving that artificial intelligence isn't just about the future of education, it's a tool that can help today's leaders make faster, fairer, and more human centered decisions. From financial forecasting to workflow efficiency, Dr. Hasty uses AI every day to free up time and focus on what matters the most, that is, people. So, welcome to the podcast, Dr. Jason. How are you doing today?
Wonderful. Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we are really excited to do this podcast today. So, you spent over 2 decades in education, from teaching to managing multi-million dollar district budgets. So, what was it that first drew you into education? And all of these years later, are those motivations still true for you?
I think the first thing is working with students. To me, is it's a calling. It's something that I truly enjoy. I think the happiest I've ever been was being in a classroom, being able to solve problems, being able to support kids, seeing them grow and change, not only academically, but emotionally. And there's nothing like that. And on top of that, just knowing the impact I felt I had in the classroom with the students I was able to reach at the time, I just saw that on a bigger scale, as to where I wanted to go to the next level so I could have a much wider impact for students. So for me, yeah, that drew me right away. And again, I started at working at a summer camp. I was a director at a summer camp working with children, and people always said, you're really good on how you interact with kids. And I was like, okay. So and then I also had really good coaches. So that was another piece. The adults in my life really made an impact that changed my trajectory for the better.
That's a beautiful answer. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. So, you often talk about transparency, trust, and service to the community. How do these core values influence how you approach innovation and technology in your district?
Yes. Anybody who's worked closely with me, I'm really big about process, especially in my current role. In my last 3 years, I've been a chief business official where I oversee the business of a district. So it's a lot about process. So I think it's incumbent upon any leader, for one, to have a clear process that's logical, that is clear steps, but also a few things. For one, it's communicated and people understand what the process is. Two, that they have feedback, so they're able to have a place where they can give feedback on that process. And you as the leader, it's incumbent upon you to amend as needed, or at least communicate as to why it is what it is, or if it can't change. So I've been really big about that. If I have no qualms about sharing, like, this is why we do this, whether there's a statute, whether there's past experience that we amended, the way we do things. So transparency is really big for me, because over time, if people know, oh, that's how they do it, and this is why, the trust. On top of that, the trust it will build when they have feedback. Like, well, no, I did bring that up to the leader at that time for the process, because they had a place to share those feelings, or actually take a role in changing the process themselves. And so therefore, I've always seen that process communication builds the trust, and ultimately just the overall feeling and the ownership within the system that the leader is overseeing.
And I think I would like to ask a follow-up question to that. So you were talking about processes and feedback, like people should have a place to give feedback. So in a situation where there's some sort of a negative feedback, how do you react to that?
Yeah, so I've always been a big, when I'm coaching others, the negative feedback, whether it feels good or not, it's feedback. Mm-hmm. So I really believe when people bring what we perceive as negative to me, it's a time for self-reflection, regardless whether it stings or hurts. But we have to really empathize with those people, people's reality and what they're seeing. And I really believe that if I'm not listening to that, and then on top of that, I'm not showing some sort of action or acknowledgement of that feedback, it's not going to be helpful to the process either. And again, so I think for me, I've always taught people, the people I work with, the negative feedback is just as important as the positive feedback. And really, you have to look at it as always actionable. So what can I do differently to change that feedback or do something about that feedback?
Right? Well, I think that is a wonderful perspective to have towards negative feedback. I love that.
Yeah.
So, moving on to our topic for today, that is focused on how you use AI every day. Can you walk us through a few concrete examples of how AI is already a part of your daily workflow as a school leader?
Yeah, 100%. I really got into AI and ChatGPT about it's going on 3 years ago. I heard about it. I saw the free version. And I just started simply asking the questions. And I'm gonna talk a lot about questions, or what is the term prompting. For me in my daily now, number one, it's a thought partner, and I don't know how everybody feels about that or understands that. AI has to be treated like a thought partner. You have a virtual assistant that you can essentially ask, any question that will give you an answer to something. So I do interact with the AI on almost, if not once, to possibly over for hours a day, because I'm usually using. Two, I'm going to use it as analytical. So I have a problem. I have a data set. I have a document that I need some type of analysis on, and depending on the size of the document, but I want a set of eyes on it to look at it, to give me some feedback on as to what I need to get done, depending on the task. So analysis is another piece. So thought partner, you can be innovative, creative. You have some ideas you're thinking about, you're trying to work something out. Two, I have some data in front of me of some type. It could be any type of data. I mean, and that's why I think people don't understand. There's no limitations. I can use pictures, video, whatever I'm going to have. I use it for my analysis. And then, of course, three, I also use it as a secondary communication. Therefore, like if I am sending out communications, you might remember Microsoft Word. Remember the little paper clip? We used to have this assistant that would pop up and say, "How may I help you?" I don't think people understand. I was an English teacher, so I'm first a writer. I write a lot, but now I can churn everything through my AI to give it a real revision based on my prompts, and I'll say, please review, revise as needed for my writing. And also I can ask it to do certain things, highlight what could be different, and it depends on what I prompt. So I definitely use it for almost what I call proofreading for my communication as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Following up with that, AI often raises concerns about replacing the human judgment. So, how do you ensure that AI supports rather than replaces the human relationship and ethical decisions that are central to education?
Yeah, I thought about this for a while. I don't feel, for one, there's this, we all have to realize AI. There still are decisions. We, the humans, the leaders that are in charge of this job, that are supervising people, we have to own the decision that we put out there. And so when I hear, well, you can't blame the AI for your decision. And now let's just start there. So it's a lot about responsibility. I also have really somewhat grave concerns if someone's not figuring out the ethics of situations in advance, because if you're at a certain level, such as mine, I've had a lot of training as far as ethics are concerned and how to deal with moral dilemmas, if you will, and understanding your core values. So I know people do have concerns around that, but I also believe that those are where we have to look at the guardrails as to how we're using the AI. AI should not be making ethical decisions for a leader. Now again, going back to the thought partner piece, if you're taking it through scenarios and going through pros and cons, and you're trying to get every good and possibly bad part of a situation, of a dilemma, if you will, it's it helps you make a more informed decision. And I think that's the key, teaching people this doesn't make your decisions, this informs your decisions. And we really have to make that part of the training.
So I think we're looking at AI supporting us rather than like just replacing our judgment altogether. So that is a wonderful perspective to have. So how are you introducing AI to other administrators and staff who may be a little hesitant or unsure about its role in education?
One of my first things when I had the ability to do so as an assistant soup, an interim soup, was anybody who I could at a leadership level, and I started with principals and up, they automatically got ChatGPT pay accounts. And I was really critical about that because I was urgent about that. I'm like, if you guys don't have this, you're not, first of all, you need access. So I made sure people had access to the device. The second thing I also did was in my meetings, I would show and model how I was using it in my daily work. So we could at least get people understanding, just like a teacher would do. And so I showed them like, here's what I did this week. Here's how I'm using the AI. You should consider it. And then of course, at that point, I would ask people how they're using it, and I'd want people to report out. So it really starts, you're going to want it to start at the leadership level, because I think truthfully right now, most leaders are using AI in some capacity. Many teachers, I won't say most, but many teachers are using AI, and a lot of students are using it, whether we want them to or not. So I think me as a leader, I absolutely am pushing for my administration, the people I supervise, to be utilizing it. However, with proper guardrails, and that's where I come in to kind of say, here's an example of how you should be using it. Also, given the fact that I've been using it so much, I can also tell when people are using it in the wrong way, whether they're not proofreading or they're using expert language with which they're not an expert in. And that's another piece I always teach too. Like, we should be using it as a thought partner to make ourselves better, but we should not be utilizing it as our expert. We need to be the experts and learn from it. And yes, we can use it to bolster, but you should be able to proofread that at an expert level to make sure what goes out is passing your tests and at your capacity. So those are just pieces that I've had conversations with my people. I've given them the access and I've modeled.
That was definitely one way to go about it. I'm also interested in knowing, you were talking about guardrails before. So what are the specific guardrails that you have for yourself, and when you were introducing AI to teachers, what were these guardrails that you had in place?
For guardrails, it's just more or less you have to, you have to know why you're using it or how you're using it. So there's some basic protocols. Like if you're going to go about using it, what's your intent in the first place? So we have, if you're just trying to write, if you're doing something serious, so I think that's the part. Like we have to find out what our intent of using the AI is, and then second, how are you going to use it? And what kind of prompting are you going to do to get to where you're going? So that's kind of the how. We want the intent of what our purpose is, and then the how are you going to prompt through it? And then of course, really it comes into the end result. Once the AI kicks out a product that you feel, what is your next step once you get this, this item, this flow of information that comes up before you? That is to me the most critical part, and that's where I put the guardrails in place. You're obviously going to be cutting and pasting this into something else, and how are you reviewing this, and what are your steps in the process to make sure what goes out is, for one, aligned with the organization you're representing, to align with your values you're representing, and also delivering what is needed in that moment. So those are some basic guardrails I use.
That is wonderful. Okay, so moving on to the next segment. Beyond district operations, how do you see AI shaping classroom instructions and student learning over the next few years?
So I do have this vision, and I do believe, and I've talked to people about it. I've done a great job in the last 10, 15 years about depth of knowledge, DOK, taking students through inquiry, asking the right questions. And I think that is a critical piece now more than ever. My own daughter doesn't type anymore. I mean, she talks to her computer, it writes her papers, and she does great. She's in AP classes, blah, blah, blah. So the day of having to learn how to type and all this, or keyboard, whatever, I mean, these things are all going to go away. And I think people really need to start understanding the real change here. So the key, though, is going to be prompting, and it's the questions, and really understanding what questions to ask and how to get somewhere with your level, your line of questioning, depending on the content and the goal in mind. So I think, for one, it's going to start at that level. At the earliest levels, we'll have math, and we'll have reading, and then we're going to have to really start talking about inquiry. How are you asking questions, and how do you go deeper into that level of inquiry from the earliest of stages? Sooner or later, if it's not happening already, I mean, many districts, I've been at multiple districts now that are one-to-one for technology. So students have a laptop or an iPad, and they have it from K all the way to 12. There's many districts that are going to one-to-one. I foresee as early as kindergarten, you're going to start seeing AI assistants that are going to be with students. This is, if it's not starting to happen in some capacity, because most of our new software that's being put on computers, all of them have an AI component, but it will be incumbent upon that teacher to integrate the lessons for the prompting and the utilization of the AI in whatever capacity they see fit. But I do foresee, and depending on what guardrails are put up and how we control this, we could see a kindergartner one day who will start with an AI in the classroom that will be its own personal AI assigned to their username, their email. They could essentially follow them all the way to senior year in high school. An AI that will never forget who they are, what they've done. They could go back to everything. I mean, this is where we're going, into an AI that could also upload or transition into different devices. We could almost bring it. I mean, and that's why I think people aren't understanding the level of where this is going. And I think some people do, and they're very scared, because you're talking about an AI that would start at 5, teach you. Also, it'd be teaching you how to read, teaching you how to do math, and you'd be interacting with on a regular level with a facilitator in the classroom, the teacher, that would make sure they're interacting with appropriately and following those certain guardrails we talk about. But then, we could also then put it in the car, that they're going to learn how to drive. That same AI that knows how they are, if they have an emotional issue or if they have something, they would be following them. You could take it all the way up until we're going to college. I mean, it's just an incredible thing that we have, where they could go home and we could transition the device at home. It could be in a watch. So these are the things that I think people are starting to realize of how this is going to essentially change. But I see in the next few years, they're already creeping in. The AI pieces are creeping into the software and into the curriculum that we're adopting today. But we're going to see it just grow and grow. And so the key to that, though, is teaching a student how to do inquiry and also interact with it appropriately to get the most growth out of it over time.
And since we're talking about students using AI, you earlier mentioned that students are using AI, whether we like it or not. So how do we ensure that students use AI ethically? Or how do they use it in a proper way? Or if they're prompting properly, how do we ensure that happens?
Districts are doing a good job. I mean, they started. It's very surface level of getting policies out there. Some districts have had some major issues around AI with images and videos and things like that. And so, it's incumbent for one to get that base policy out there. But we're starting to see that once the policy's out there, like, you have to use it ethically. Okay. But now we're going to start having so many different situations that are going to pop up that really put what ethics are to the test and when can I use it. So I think, over time, it will be a trial and error, like many things, just like the internet was. Internet was Wild Wild West, and now we have a lot of regulations. So I am all for a lot of regulations. I think the key is not only going to be the usage of, but also the access to, because people we're seeing in Florida, for instance, where it's illegal to get mental health support from an AI for good reason. Probably shouldn't be happening, so we understand what that what that means. So we're seeing people that are relying on this in ways that we never thought that would be a legitimate way, but it's happening. So it's going to be incumbent upon us just to be, somewhat visionary, get in front of some of these things. But also we will have to be reactive, because there's going to be things that we just never thought possible that would be negative. And I am positive, but that's where we're going to have to do it. So legislation, school policies, I could see a doctrine of practices, positive practices, and like we have professional norms. We're going to have norms for AI and how we utilize it. And keep in mind, there's going to be so many different types of AI and how we interact. So that'll be critical as that changes. How do our policies change?
That makes a lot of sense. So, on to my next question. What do you believe educators most need right now in terms of mindset or training to prepare students for an AI augmented future?
For me, it's tough because I hear we have all these AI detectors. Teachers are, colleges are using AI detectors. And when you really do the deep dive on these AI detectors, they're all inconsistent. So we're not sure if and is that plagiarism? Is that cheating? So there's this definite divide among the teachers and educators. Let's just say education in general. There's a big divide about how students should be allowed to utilize this and whether it's cheating or not. So I think for me, looking ahead, we're going to have to really come up with some, norms across the board as to what's that right now, and very divided. So many people, because we have teachers that feel it's cheating, but they're using AI to grade their papers. If I was an English teacher, I would have loved to have had 40 papers I could run through an AI just to give me some idea of where they're falling on a rubric within minutes. I mean, and it's nearly like it's hard not to want to use that, or because you're talking about cutting 7 to 8 hours of your, down to 30 minutes of time. So I really believe we have to kind of we have to really change our perception of what this is and what it means and get ahead of it. And I really want to see teachers start integrating it. For one, using the inquiry, the level of questioning and prompting, as we're calling it, to and then to the specific utilization of it within the classroom. And so the teachers that really bring this in right now as fast as early as possible, but just have some really what I call explicit direct instruction around how they're utilizing the AI are going to benefit the most, because we want kids engaging with this, because it's going to happen. I mean, we're finding out degrees right now, kids are going to be graduating in the next year, 2 years, 3 years with degrees that may be obsolete. I mean, and arguably are already. So if we're not really getting students engaging with these systems now, and teachers aren't making this a part of their daily in some respect, we're going to be really behind the ball on this.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay, so I think with that, I'll be moving on to the next segment. You managed large-scale initiatives from solar energy projects to budget reforms. How do you balance innovation with fiscal responsibility and public trust?
As a chief business official, remember, I started off as an English teacher. I did pupil services, student services. I've done human resources. I've run school programs. So I've been on both sides. And as a chief business official, you are trying not to limit the innovation, but you also have to ensure controls are in place so we can have longevity over time. We don't want to be fiscally insolvent, and so it's incumbent upon me and to just kind of put those controls in place, but also leave enough space for innovation. So I've always been one that finds those free things. Even as an English teacher, when I was back in my first district in Pasadena, I mean, I was the one that did the grant. I asked for 20 some computers and they showed up, and the district didn't pay for it. Those kind of things. So I think it's incumbent upon me I'm always trying to find how can we either bring this in cheaper, bring it in for free. That's another one. And also just looking for those resources. But one thing I always say, good leaders and even people in my role, we find disruptors. A disruptor is something like Khan Academy, which was something that became open source and available for all, and teachers utilized it regularly. Teachers are always going to resources that are free and cheap. So I do believe innovation starts in the classroom with the teachers that bring those ideas to the forefront. And so a lot of times I have seen we try to bring in shiny, expensive things that are going to be there for about a year or two. And it's tough because you have to kind of have a good judge on that. For me, I always look at, if this fits the overall vision of where we're going to be in 5 years, and it's incumbent upon me to do that. I should be looking 5 to 10 years. Where our students going to be from that point forth, or when they become active community members, giving back, working in the world, is this product right now going to be what gets them there? And so I think about that a lot. And I've always tried to find ways to be innovative and save money, but also expand students, support so they can become the best citizens they can be.
That is a wonderful answer. So, looking ahead, what's your long-term vision for how AI could reshape how districts plan, operate, and serve their communities?
I believe it's going to be, if it's not already, it's becoming a daily part of many educators' life. Some at a very what I call a tier 1 level. But as I've seen a lot of these new products coming out. typically it's one of my questions too. What AI component do you have integrated into this product? Because I want to know. I want to know, for one, how is it being utilized? I want to know about security of it and how, what the mechanism of it, how it interacts with the software. And with that question, guess what? Most products that are coming out, whether it be curriculum instruction, budget software, everything, there's AI components everywhere. I mean, if you use basic levels of QuickBooks and budgeting, there's an AI component now that can just look at the receipt, put it, so we're finding all these components everywhere. So it is becoming a part of our daily life. The question is, how is it going to evolve really into more physical space? And so that's where I think people are we're a little leery of, we're seeing Tesla asking for, down payments on robots. We're going to have actual robotic assistants walking around helping us in the home and hospitals and in schools. And so that's where people are getting a little leery. Are we having devices that are listening to us at all times to kind of get to know us better and also support us? However, they're listening to us at all times. So these are all pieces that, this is where some of it already is. I mean, if you have Alexa, if you have Siri, we're already seeing our advertisements tailored to what we talk about on a daily basis when we look at Amazon. These are all pieces that it's here. I don't think many of us are always admitting to it. Some of us are turning off all our internet and phones, and I get that too. But the vision is pretty clear that we are going to be fully integrated into this, and it will be a part of our everyday life. I would like to say whether we like to or not. I mean, I don't know if we're gonna have an option, but that's where we're going. Us to understand it, to also start teaching to it, so students can get the skill sets to understand the work world that will be created by this.
And I think from what I'm hearing is that AI is here to stay and it's not going to go away. So might as well just learn how to use it to the best of their efficiency. And just come to terms with it, and not in a sad way, but in a way that you can use it to make your life a little easier. So that makes a lot of sense. So those were all the questions that I had from my end. We have this little segment where we have the previous leader that we've done a podcast with ask the question to the next one. So the question that has come up for you is that who do you look up to for inspiration in your daily leadership journey? Are there any specific mentors, leaders, or books that have significantly shaped your approach to leadership?
So I did my doctorate at the University of Southern California and USC, and they do such a wonderful job of pairing you with incredible leaders. And so again, to name a few, we had David Cash, we had Pedro Garcia, John Roach, Michael Escalante. So these were all, leaders that I had the pleasure to have in school that were all long time serving superintendents. And again, the great thing is they have inspired me because I didn't know even this level of leadership was possible until I really heard their stories and saw what they did and their vision, even back then, taking districts to the next level and forward. So again, I saw what was possible through them. And I think that is also, really important for all that are watching the podcast: mentorship and having leaders that you have relationships with, that you look up to, that you're deliberate and intentionally interacting with to learn from and take advice from, are critical to your success, and also just how you adapt into these higher level positions.
Right. So thank you so much for taking out the time to do this with our students, sharing your vision about how AI in the future is going to look like. And I think our listeners will have a lot of fun listening to this podcast. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.